All right, it's 1:15 a.m. We're coming to you live from Johannesburg, our Auckland Park studios. My colleagues Simphiwe Ncongwane and Simphiwe Ncongwane are still standing by at the Rock at the IEC Centre. Of course, we'll be crossing to them. But for now, let's take a look at some of the stories that have been leading as we talk about the elections. The EFF has reached the 1 million vote mark. Earlier, my colleague Simphiwe Ncongwane spoke to the EFF's Floyd Shivambu about his party's performance at the polls.
We are inspired that we have reached the million mark now, because in 2014, at this stage when it was 70% of the votes of the voting stations counted, we were far below a million. We're actually far below 500,000 votes. So now we're at this stage, and major metros have not yet been put on the board. More than half of Gauteng is not yet on the board, and you will know that Gauteng is one of our biggest contributions in terms of the voter base of the EFF. It gave us 450,000 votes in 2014, and it looks like in our own confirmation of results from voting stations, almost all VDs are doubling the numbers that we got in both 2014 and 2016. So that number is going to dramatically change and improve, because the EFF is a growing organization, and we're also inspired that we're the only organization that is growing much more significantly and emphatically as opposed to all other parties that are on the board there. You know that the ANC is expected to reach the 11 million. They're still at 6. It is not going to happen. Even with this Cyril Ramaphosa, whom they were saying that is the most popular, clean person, he's going to be performing less than what Zuma achieved. That is one of the facts that people of South Africa must know, that Ramaphosa is going to be outdone by Jacob Zuma, whom they had said all sorts of things about, and Ramaphosa was portrayed as Mr. Clean, as a person who's going to save South Africa. But the voters of South Africa.
Now, Floyd, just to interrupt you there, I see that 68% of the votes have been counted. Are the pieces of the puzzle now coming together? Do you have a clearer picture of how the EFF will fare?
It's not 68% of the votes that have been counted. It is 68% of the voting stations have been tallied. So we do not know yet how many votes have been casted by the people of South Africa. What we know is that the major and the bigger voting stations in the metros have not yet been tallied, because the process of verification takes longer for the metropolitan areas. And if you check the previous results, the EFF always fares better in the metropolitan areas. We got more than 500,000 votes of the 1.1 million votes that we got in 2014 from the metropolitan areas. And we are confident that at the end of this process, the EFF would have recorded an emphatic growth, which is going to then redefine politics. And we are confident that there won't be an outright winner in Gauteng. So if there's anyone who thought that they must celebrate Gauteng, it's too early to celebrate, because
just
there won't be an outright winner.
Unfortunately, we don't have much time. But before I let you go, other parties have been crying foul at the irregularities that they flagged, and they basically saying that the entire process has been thrust into controversy. So what's your? And I do understand that the EFF and as well as the other parties have lodged complaints with the IEC. What kind of complaints are these?
Well, we don't have major complaints that have got material impact on the elections as the EFF. And those small parties must accept the results. Like, they never campaigned for elections. They can't now expect the board to tell them what they did not achieve on the ground. So the small parties must wait. They must stop disrupting the counting process and the verification process here. We do not want to be irritated by people who did not campaign. They thought that the success of the EFF that happened 8 months of its existence in 2014 is going to be replicated everywhere. It is not the case. The EFF had a clearer focus, a clear ideological posture, hard work and dedication. So they must not think that it will apply to all of them. It is only the EFF which is capable of achieving such huge success, not these small parties that are protesting here and irritating the people of South Africa.
Mr. Shivambu, we've been getting reports that your chairperson, Advocate Dalimpofu, has actually sent some of the EFF voters to vote twice as a means of testing the system. Would you authenticate these claims?
I do not know of such. I'm not aware of the chairperson having done anything of that nature. I'm not aware of such.
Right.